April 13th, 1941. 0420 hours. Tobruk, Libya. The smell hits first. Cordite. Diesel. Sun-baked concrete bleeding heat even before dawn. Private William Ruffin crouches in a slit trench that's more grave than shelter, running his thumb along the edge of a fuel canister he shouldn't have. Around him, the 2 of 14th Australian Infantry Battalion waits in that terrible pre-battle silence, where every man pretends he's not counting his own heartbeats. 200 meters north, the Italian bunker network sits like a concrete tumor in the desert. Pillboxes, machine gun nests, interlocking fields of fire that have swallowed 3 Australian assaults in 14 days. Artillery has pounded that position until the rocks themselves should surrender. Nothing moves that Ruthven's rifle lies across his lap, a standard Lee Enfield .303, already obsolete by the standards of this mechanized war. But welded to its barrel, lashed with wire scavenged from a bombed-out truck, is something that shouldn't exist. A brass nozzle, rubber tubing, a hand pump mechanism cannibalized from a broken fuel injector. His commanding officer called it a death trap. The British Ordnance liaison who inspected it 3 days ago used different words. Dangerous improvisation by an amateur. He filed a report recommending disciplinary action. Ruthven kept welding. Because this isn't about regulations. This is about the mathematics of siege warfare. The Australians hold Tobruk barely. Rommel's Africa Corps encircles them on 3 sides. Supply ships dodge U-boats to deliver ammunition that burns faster than it arrives. Every bunker the Italians hold is one more position the Germans will inherit when they push their next offensive. And that offensive is coming. Ruthven learned metalwork in his father's garage in Melbourne, learned at fixing tractors and water pumps, where precision matters less than function. Where if something doesn't work, you make it work, because the crop won't wait for factory parts. War, he's discovered, operates on similar principles. The fuel canister sloshes in his grip. Petrol mixed with something thicker, motor oil, maybe tar. He doesn't know the chemistry. Doesn't need to. He knows fire spreads. Knows confined spaces amplify heat. Knows men break when their cover becomes their crematorium. His sergeant crawls up beside him, face caked with dust that turns sweat into war paint. You really doing this, Willie? Ruthven checks the ignition mechanism, a modified spark plug wired to a motorcycle battery in his pack. The whole contraption weighs 23 pounds. He's tested it twice in the dark, away from officers who might stop him. Both times, the flame reached 30 feet. Both times, he nearly set himself on fire. Yeah, he says, I'm doing this. The sergeant nods once, doesn't argue, doesn't wish him luck, just slides back to his position and signals the squad. Fix bayonets, because whatever happens next, they're going behind Ruthven or retrieving his body. Dawn breaks over the Mediterranean like a spreading bruise. Ruthven stands. 48 hours earlier, British 9th Division headquarters, Tobruk perimeter. The bunker smells like stale cigarette smoke and command decisions gone wrong. Major Edmund Hastings of the Royal Ordnance Corps stands with his arms crossed, staring at the contraption lying on the map table like a dead mechanical animal. This, he says slowly, is what passes for engineering the colonial forces? Ruthven stands at attention, still covered in welding slag and grease. His company commander, Captain James Murray, shifts uncomfortably beside him. 3 other officers, a New Zealand artillery observer, a South African liaison, and a British quartermaster, lean in to inspect the weapon with expressions ranging from curiosity to barely concealed contempt. Hastings picks up the rifle by its stock, holding it away from his body like it might detonate. The jury-rigged fuel system dangles awkwardly. The welds are rough, functional rather than elegant, wire-wrapping secure components that should be machined to tolerances measured in thousandths of an inch. You welded a fuel tank. Hastings continues, to a rifle, using scrap metal from a lorry. And you believe this will accomplish what exactly? Clear bunkers, sir. Ruthven's voice doesn't waver. The Italians are dug in behind 3 feet of reinforced concrete. Artillery bounces off. Infantry can't get close enough to throw grenades without getting cut down. But fire doesn't need to penetrate concrete. It just needs to get inside. The quartermaster snorts. And how precisely do you intend to get inside a pillbox with a garden hose taped to a rifle? Ventilation slits, sir. Gun ports. Every bunker needs air. I pump fuel through the opening. Ignite it with the spark mechanism. The pressure forces burning liquid into the structure. Temperature inside reaches 600 degrees in under 10 seconds. Hastings sets the weapon down with deliberate care, as if handling something contaminated. Private Ruffin, do you have any formal training in chemistry, thermodynamics, pressurized fuel delivery systems? No, sir. Military engineering qualifications of any kind? No, sir. Then on what basis? And I ask this with genuine academic curiosity. Do you believe yourself qualified to design a weapon that trained engineers across 3 continents have failed to perfect? The question hangs in the tobacco-stained air. Ruffin meets his gaze. I don't need to perfect it, sir. I need it to work once. The room goes quiet. Captain Murray clears his throat. Major, the 214th has lost 37 men trying to take those bunkers. Ruffin's weapon is unorthodox, but it's a garage project, Hastings interrupts. A farm boy playing inventor because he watched something burn once and thought he understood fire. He turns back to Ruffin. What happens when this fuel tank ruptures? When the spark mechanism fails? When you're standing 10 feet from an enemy position covered in petrol and your contraption decides to immolate you instead of them? Then someone else picks it up and tries again, sir. Hastings blinks. For just a moment, something shifts behind his eyes. Recognition, maybe, or the uncomfortable realization that desperation breeds a different kind of mathematics. But regulations are regulations. Captain Murray, I'm filing a formal report with General Morshed. This weapon violates approximately 17 separate ordnance protocols. It's unsafe, untested, and frankly an embarrassment to military engineering standards. He gestures dismissively at the rifle. Remove it from service. If Private Ruffin wishes to contribute to the war effort, he can do so with standard-issue equipment like every other soldier in this garrison. Murray's jaw tightens. Major, with respect, my report will be on the general's desk by 1400 hours. This discussion is concluded. The officers file out. Ruffin remains standing at attention, staring at his weapon lying on the table like evidence at a court-martial. Captain Murray waits until they're alone. Willie, he says quietly, you heard the man. Regulations. Ruffin nods, picks up his rifle. The contraption's weight feels different now, heavier with official disapproval, lighter with the knowledge that no one can actually stop him from carrying it into combat. Yes, sir, he says. Regulations. Murray's eyes flicker to weapon, then back to Ruffin's face. He says nothing else. Sometimes in war, silence is permission. April 13th, 1941. 0442 hours. No man's land, Tobruk perimeter. Ruffin moves like a man walking underwater. Each step calculated. Each breath measured. The weigher's contraption makes his shoulders scream, but he keeps his torso straight, movements fluid, because jerky motion draws eyes and eyes draw bullets. Behind him, 8 Australians from the company spread in a loose skirmish line. Corporal Davies on his left, Private Mackenzie on his right. Many shared water with, shared silence with, shared that dark trench humor that's the only thing keeping any of them sane. The desert floor between their lines and the Italian bunkers is a graveyard of previous attempts. Shell craters, spent brass glinting in the early light. The burned-out hull of the Matilda tank that took 3 anti-tank rounds before its crew could bail out. No one bailed out. The first bunker sits like a concrete fist 60 meters ahead. Its gun ports are dark rectangles in the pre-dawn gray. Ruffin knows the mathematics. A Breda M37 machine gun has an effective range of 800 meters. He's currently at 200. They haven't opened fire yet. That's the part that turns his stomach liquid. The waiting. The knowledge that somewhere in that darkness, Italian gunners are watching through apertures, fingers resting on triggers, making the same cold calculations he is. Who dies first? Who dies fastest? Who doesn't die at all? Davies whispers from his left. Movement. Left bunker. Second firing port. Ruffin sees it. A shadow shifting. the barely visible outline of a helmet. Still no fire, they're waiting for something. Coordinating fields of fire, maybe, or watch and see if this is a probe or a full assault. The Italians have learned hard lessons at Tobruk. 3 months of siege have taught both sides that ammunition matters more than aggression. Every bullet counts. Every burst controlled. Ruthven covers another 10 meters. His fuel tank sloshes against the spine. The spark mechanism's battery digs into his kidney. His Lien field feels like it weighs 50 pounds instead of 9.50 meters now. The bunker's ventilation slit becomes visible, a horizontal opening just below the main gun port, maybe 18 inches wide, designed to draw cool air in and push cordite smoke out. Standard Italian defensive architecture. He studied photographs of captured positions, memorized the engineering. Every fortress has lungs. You just have to make them breathe fire. 40 meters of Mackenzie hisses. Willie, right side. They're traversing. The Breda's barrel shifts. Micro-adjustments. Tracking their advance. Ruthven can almost feel the crosshairs settling on his chest. The Italian gunner's breath steadying. That moment before the trigger press when training becomes murder becomes mathematics. 30 meters. His thumb finds the ignition switch. A modified toggle from a radio set. One flip, and the spark plug heats. 3 seconds later, he can squeeze the rifle's trigger, not to fire a bullet, but to open the fuel valve and create something that shouldn't exist outside nightmares. 25 meters. The machine gun opens up, not at Ruthven, at Davies. The Breda's distinctive bark, slower than a Vickers, heavier than an MG-34, rips the dawn apart. Tracers draw red lines through the air. Davies hits the ground screaming or silent. Ruthven can't tell because his own ears are ringing and Mackenzie is returning fire with his rifle, and someone behind him is shouting coordinates or orders or prayers. Ruthven doesn't stop moving. 20 meters that he's in the kill zone now, the space where every weapon system in that bunker complex can reach him, where covering fire means nothing because the angles are wrong and the concrete is absolute, and the only way out is forward or dead. The Breda swings toward him. 15 meters, he drops to one knee, not from fear, from training, from the muscle memory that says a smaller target is a living target. His thumb flips the ignition switch. The battery hums. The spark plug begins its 3-second heat cycle. The ventilation slit is right there. A black rectangle in gray concrete, an opening designed for air, about to breathe something else entirely. 10 meters. The machine gun finds him. He hears the bullets snapping past, that distinctive crack when rounds pass close enough to feel the air pressure change. Concrete chips explode around him. Mackenzie is still firing, buying seconds with his own exposure. Ruthven raises his rifle, points the brass nozzle at the ventilation slit. 5 meters. His finger touches the trigger and squeezes. The weapon shudders in his hands. For half a heartbeat, nothing happens. The fuel pump cycles. The nozzle trembles. Ruthven's entire existence compresses into that single mechanical hesitation, the space between theory and reality, between garage experiment and battlefield physics. Then the spark catches, a thin stream of liquid fire erupts from the nozzle. Not a flamethrower's theatrical gout. This is something meaner, more surgical. Pressurized fuel ignited mid-flight, arcing through the air like molten rope. It hits the ventilation slit and funnels inward, drawn by the bunker's own airflow, pulled into the concrete cavity by physics that don't care about national flags or military doctrine. The screaming starts immediately, not the sharp yelp of men hit by bullets. This is different, primal. The sound humans make when fire finds them in enclosed spaces, and there's nowhere to run except deeper into the flames. Ruthven keeps the trigger depressed. The pump mechanism chugs. 3 seconds. 5. 7. The fuel tank on his back grows lighter. Inside the bunker, something fundamental changes. He can't see it, but he knows, the way a mechanic knows when an engine seizes. When metal reaches temperatures it wasn't designed to survive. The ventilation slit begins vomiting black smoke. Thick, greasy, the smell of burning diesel, and something worse. The Breda goes silent. Ruthven releases a trigger. His hands shake. Not from fear, from the weapon's vibration, from carrying 23 pounds of improvised death across open ground while being shot at. He's still alive. That fact hasn't registered yet. Mackenzie appears beside him, breathing hard. Jesus Christ, Willie. Jesus Christ. The bunker's main door, a steel panel on reinforced hinges, crashes open. 3 Italian soldiers stumble out. Their uniforms smoke. One's face is blistered red. Another claws at his eyes, blinded by smoke or heat or both. The third just runs, sprinting away from the bunker like it's a burning ship, and he'll drown if he stays. They're not carrying weapons. They're not soldiers anymore. Just men trying to survive the next 10 seconds. Corporal Davies, alive, limping but alive, rises from cover. He doesn't shoot. None of them do. There's an unspoken rule in siege warfare, a mathematics of mercy. Men who abandon their weapons mid-combat aren't combatants. They're refugees from fire. The Italians keep running toward their own lines. No one stops them. Ruffin stares at the bunker's smoking entrance. His contraption worked. The garage junk performed exactly as predicted. Forced burning fuel into a sealed space, raised the temperature until human endurance collapsed, transformed concrete shelter into a crematorium oven. Left bunker. Mackenzie shouts. They're still active. 40 meters south, the second pillbox opens fire. Another Breda, rattling out disciplined bursts. They've watched their comrades burn. They know what's coming. Fear makes some men are UN.IT makes others fight harder. Ruffin checks his fuel gauge. 3/4 remaining. Enough for 2 more burns, maybe 3 if he's conservative. The spark mechanism still hums. The pump system operates within tolerances his father would call good enough for government work. He starts moving toward the second bunker. The squad follows. They've seen the mathematics change. 14 days of stalemate, broken by a farm boy's welding torch and a disregard for ordnance regulations. Davies pulls an extra fuel canister from his pack. Insurance Ruffin didn't ask for, but desperately needs. Covering fire. Davies yells, "Keep their heads down." The Australians open up. Lee Enfield's crack in that steady rhythm trained riflemen produce, not panic fire, but suppression. Controlled. Economical. Bullets spark off concrete. Ricochet through gun ports. Force the Italian crew to choose between accurate fire and survival. They choose survival. The Breda's barrel retracts slightly. Still dangerous. Still lethal. But hesitant. Ruffin crosses 30 meters. 25. The same terrible mathematics as before, but faster now. He knows the weapon works. Knows the timing. Knows that hesitation kills, and forward momentum is the only armor that matters. 20 meters. This bunker's ventilation slit is partially blocked. Sandbags stuffed into the opening, reducing airflow. They've adapted. Learned from watching their comrades burn. But sandbags aren't airtight. Fire finds gaps. Fire always finds gaps 0.15 meters. He drops to one knee, flips the ignition. The 3-second cycle feels like 3 hours. The Breda swings toward him, barrel adjusting. The gunner making the same calculations, range, windage, elevation, the specific mathematics of ending one Australian soldier's life point 10 meters. Ruffin squeezes a trigger. The liquid fire stream hits the sandbags. For a moment, it seems pointless. Fuel splashing against canvas, dripping down concrete, wasted. Then the pressure builds. The sandbags are porous. The fuel soaks through. The fire follows. Into the bunker. Into the darkness. Into lungs. The screaming is worse this time. Maybe because Ruffin's closer. Maybe because he's done this before and the novelty of horror has worn off, leaving only the raw mechanics of what fire does to human flesh. The bunker door flies open. For men this time. Then 5. They're not running in formation. They're not soldiers. They're cattle fleeing a barn fire, stumbling over each other, desperate for air that doesn't burn. .1 drops his rifle at Ruffin's feet. Hands raised. Face blackened. Words in Italian that Ruffin doesn't understand but doesn't need to. Surrender is a universal language. April 13th, 1941. 0538 hours. Capture Italian positions. Tobruk perimeter. The mathematics. in the end, is simple. 14 days, 3 failed assaults, 37 Australian casualties, artillery barges that accomplished nothing except announcing intentions, and wasting shells a garrison can't afford to replace. Versus 3 hours, 1 improvised weapon, 7 bunkers neutralized, 40 Italian defenders killed or driven out, 90 captured, hands raised, coughing smoke, their eyes carrying that 1,000-yard stare that comes from being cooked alive inside concrete. Captain Murray arrives with the second wave. His face is unreadable, equal parts relief and something darker. He surveys the smoking bunkers, the surrendering Italians being zip-tied by Australian infantry, the bodies of men who didn't evacuate fast enough. "Christ, Willie," he says quietly, "what did you build?" Ruffin sits on a pile of sandbags, his contraption resting across his knees. The fuel tank is empty now. 7 burns, 7 fortifications. The brass nozzle is heat-scarred black. The rubber tubing has partially melted. The spark mechanism gave out on the 6th bunker. He had to manually ignite the last burn with a cigarette lighter and reflexes faster than his own survival instinct. His hands won't stop shaking. "Something that works," he answers. The Italian network falls like dominoes after that. When word spreads that the Australians have a weapon that turns bunkers into ovens, resistance collapses. Soldiers abandon positions before Ruffin arrives. They've done the mathematics. Concrete isn't cover anymore. It's a coffin with ventilation slit. BY 0700 hours. The entire defensive line surrenders. By 0830, engineers from the 213 Battalion are examining Ruffin's weapon with expressions ranging from professional interest to barely conceal horror. A South African lieutenant with an engineering degree from Johannesburg holds a rifle like an archaeologist examining an artifact from a more brutal civilization. "This shouldn't work," he mutters. "The fuel pressure is inconsistent. The ignition timing is all wrong. The nozzle bore should create backflow that ruptures the tank. But it does work." Murray says, "We're standing in 7 bunkers that prove it works." The lieutenant doesn't argue. Can't argue. The evidence is scattered across 200 meters of captured ground. Smoking concrete, abandoned weapons, Italian prisoners who keep their distance from Ruffin like he's carrying plague. Major Hastings arrives at 0945 hours. The British ordnance officer who called Ruffin's invention dangerous improvisation by an amateur stands in the center of the capture position, surrounded by proof that amateurs sometimes understand war better than professionals. He looks at Ruffin, at the weapon, at the bunkers. "Private," he says slowly, "I owe you an apology." Ruffin doesn't respond, doesn't nod, just sits there with his garage project in his shaking hands and the smell of burned fuel soaked so deep into his uniform he'll never wash it out. Hastings continues, "I was wrong about your weapon, about your qualifications, about," he stops, regroups. "I made recommendations based on protocol. You made decisions based on necessity. History, I suspect, will favor your judgment." "History can go to hell, sir," Ruffin says quietly. "I just wanted to stop watching my mates die trying to take concrete boxes with rifles." Silence hangs between them. Other officers shuffle uncomfortably. Protocol says Ruffin should stand at attention, show respect, acknowledge his superior's admission with grace. Ruffin stays seated. Murray breaks attention. "Major, I'm recommending Private Ruffin for commendation. His weapon ended a 2-week stalemate in 3 hours. That's..." "More than commendation," Hastings interrupts. "I'm forwarding a report to General Moorshed. Full documentation. Schematics. Combat performance data." He looks directly at Ruffin. "Private, your garage junk is going to become standard equipment. We're manufacturing 30 units by week's end. Every assault company in the garrison will have one." Ruffin's expression doesn't change. "They'll need better fuel pumps. Mine burned out after 6 cycles. And the ignition mechanism needs redundancy. Battery power isn't reliable under sustained fire." The South African engineer pulls out a notebook. "Walk me through the modifications." So Ruffin does. Right there, sitting on sandbags in a captured bunker that still smells like crematorium, he teaches professional engineers how to improve a weapon They called impossible BY 1,400 hours. Word reaches British North Africa Command. By 1600, an intelligence liaison from Cairo arrives to examine the weapon personally. By 1800, Ruffin is giving a demonstration to officers who outrank him by decades and degrees, but still defer to his expertise. The farm boy, the amateur, the man who welded scrap metal into something that changed siege warfare. 3 weeks later, the official ACPAC flamethrower enters production. It uses Ruffin's basic design, pressurized fuel, spark ignition, rifle-mounted delivery system, but with better materials, proper engineering, factory precision. It works exactly the same, because genius isn't about qualifications or credentials or protocol. It's about looking at a problem everyone calls unsolvable and deciding that everyone doesn't understand the specific mathematics of fire, desperation, and scrap metal. 6 months later, Ruffin receives a Victoria Cross. The citation reads, "For most conspicuous bravery in attack." It doesn't mention garage welding or ordnance officers who laughed or regulations violated. IT just states facts. The mathematics of what one man did when professionals said it couldn't be done. November 1942. El Alamein, Egypt, 1,100 miles east of Tobruk. Lieutenant William Ruffin, no longer a private, no longer just a farm boy with a welding torch, stands a supply depot watching crates being loaded onto Bedford trucks. Each crate is stenciled with the same designation. FLA HRWR Portable MK2 ACK Pack. He doesn't open them. Doesn't need to. He knows what's inside. His design. Refined. Improved. Mass-produced by engineers who turn garage improvisation into military doctrine. The brass nozzle's a machine now. The fuel pumps factory-tested. The ignition system's backed by redundant batteries and manual strikers. But the core principle remains is, fire doesn't care about concrete. It just needs an opening. A young corporal from the 248th TH Battalion approaches, carrying one of the weapons. Fresh-faced. Nervous. The way Ruffin looked 18 months ago, when everyone called him crazy. "Sir," the corporal says, "they told me you invented this thing." Ruffin smiles slightly. "I welded some parts together. Other people made it official. Does it really work like they say? Clears bunkers in seconds?" The smile fades. Ruffin remembers the screaming, remembers Italian soldiers stumbling out of concrete tombs, their faces blistered, their eyes carrying something no human should witness. Remembers that fire is efficient but not clean, effective but not merciful. "Yes," he says quietly, "it works." The corporal nods, absorbing this, running calculations about his own survival. "We're hitting the German lines at dawn. Atlantic Wall fortifications. They say it's worse than anything the Italians built. It probably is. But fire doesn't care about German engineering any more than it cared about Italian concrete." Ruffin pauses. "Just remember, you're not trying to kill them. You're trying to make them leave. Big difference." "Is there, sir?" Ruffin doesn't answer. Some questions don't have answers that help anyone sleep. By November 1942, over 300 ACPAC flamethrowers operate across North Africa. They clear Axis bunkers at Gazala, Mersa Matruh, and finally at El Alamein, where Rommel's Afrika Korps makes its last stand before the long retreat to Tunisia. British after-action reports note the weapon's devastating psychological effect. German prisoners describe it as the fire devil. Italian survivors refuse to discuss it at all, but the statistics tell the story more clearly than words. Bunker assaults that previously took days now take hours. Casualties drop by 60% when flamethrower teams lead the attack. Not because fewer defenders fight back, because most offenders don't fight at all. They evacuate the moment they hear the fuel pump cycling. They've learned the mathematics. Concrete that protects against bullets becomes a crematorium against fire, and no defensive position is worth dying inside. Major Hastings, now Lieutenant Colonel Hastings, with a desk in Cairo and access to intelligence reports spanning 3 continents, writes the official history of the ACPAC's development. His report is thorough, professional. It credits Ruffin's innovation while noting that proper engineering oversight transformed crude improvisation into reliable equipment. He sends Ruffin a copy. Ruffin reads it once, then files it with his other commendations. The Victoria Cross citation, the promotion orders, letters from soldiers who survived bunker assaults because someone invented a weapon that professionals called impossible. He keeps them all in a tin box that once held rifle cartridges. Physical proof that sometimes, just sometimes, the man who doesn't know something can't be done is the only one capable of doing it. April 1943. 2 years after Tobruk. Ruffin transfers to the Pacific Theater. Different enemy, different terrain, but the same concrete bunkers, the same mathematics of siege warfare, the same desperate need for weapons that turn fortifications into vulnerabilities. His design follows him. Modified for jungle combat, adapted for island warfare. Used at Tarawa, Peleliu, Okinawa, anywhere soldiers needed to clear bunkers defended by men who'd rather die than surrender. The Farm Boys Garage project becomes doctrine. Training manuals reference his techniques. Engineers study his schematics in military academies. The weapon mocked as dangerous improvisation saves thousands of lives by ending battles that might have ground on for weeks. And Ruffin? He survives the war, returns to Melbourne, opens a metal workshop that specializes in agricultural equipment, tractors, water pumps, irrigation systems. The same practical engineering that built a weapon now builds tools for feeding the world. He rarely discusses Tobruk, doesn't attend reunions or give interviews. When asked about the Victoria Cross, he changes the subject. When pressed about his invention, he offers the same response every time. I just made something work when it needed to work. That's not heroism. That's mechanics. But history records it differently. History records that on April 13, 1941, an Australian private with no engineering credentials and a disregard for regulations looked at an unsolvable problem and decided that scrap metal, fuel, and desperation might solve what expertise couldn't. History records that he was right. And history records that sometimes the greatest innovations come not from laboratories or drawing boards or military think tanks, but from soldiers in trenches who simply refuse to accept that the impossible should stay impossible. The engineers laughed at his homemade weapon until it changed the battle, until it changed the war, until it proved that genius isn't about credentials. It's about seeing what everyone else missed and having the courage to weld it together, even when professionals say it will never work. William Ruffin died in 1970, age 54. His Victoria Cross sold at auction for £144,000. His original flamethrower prototype sits in the Australian War Memorial in Canberra, behind glass, labeled as a field-expedient weapon of historical significance. But the real legacy isn't in museums. It's in every soldier who survived a bunker assault because someone invented a weapon professionals call garage junk. It's in every engineer who learned that improvisation sometimes trumps precision. It's in the mathematical proof that courage and creativity can change battles, wars, and the very definition of what's possible. One man, one weapon, one moment when mockery became respect and impossible became inevitable. That's the legacy. That's what lasts.